Welcome to the fourth session of this year's Ask an Expert Firewise virtual workshop series. Today we're going to hear 3 community risk reduction success stories that will inspire and motivate. They're examples that reinforce the positive impacts of mitigation and that it does make a difference. This is our 3rd year for the virtual workshops, with just one more session left in the 2016 series, and that one is scheduled for November 17th, and we hope you'll join us for that last one of the year. Registration for that November session will open this afternoon on firewise.org. Depending on where you're joining us from, good morning or good afternoon. I'm Kathy Prudhomme, the Firewise Program Manager with the National Fire Protection Association's Wildland Fire Division. We're located in our Denver field office, and I'm your host for today's 1-hour workshop. Joining me today is my colleague Aaron Anderson, our tech guru, who's working to keep us live and connected, so our thanks to him. This is the first time we've had more than one guest presenter, and we went big and have 3 with us today. We have a little anxiety about things going flawlessly with 3 guests, so be easy on us if there happens to be a minor glitch at some point. This session received more than 140 registrations, and we extend a warm welcome to each of you joining us live. The workshop is being recorded and will be available later today in our archive on firewise.org under the Online Courses and Education tab. Please share the information from the session with your stakeholders, colleagues, and neighbors. If you're not familiar with the National Firewise Communities USA program, I encourage you to visit firewise.org to learn more about how you can get involved and begin the process of becoming a recognized Firewise participant. There's currently 1,355 active Firewise communities throughout 40 states. Each completed a rigorous set of criteria to become a participant in the national program, where residents in wildfire-prone areas work with their neighbors to reduce risk annually and increase their home's potential for survivability at both the individual parcel level and also throughout the neighborhood and larger community. In today's workshop, we'll be sharing recent risk reduction success stories from this past summer, and those are from Idaho, Colorado, and Washington. Just a quick overview of the format. Over the next 40 minutes, I'm going to talk with our guest presenters, Jerry, Jim, and Patrick, about their recent mitigation successes, and then we'll take the balance of the hour as an opportunity for you to ask your live questions. At any time from now until we get to the interactive component, if you have a question, use the question mark icon in the upper right-hand corner of your screen and go ahead and submit it. We'll get to as many of those as time allows. Now, without further delay, it's my privilege to introduce you to Captain Jerry McAdams with the Boise, Idaho Fire Department. Jerry's a senior captain and wildfire mitigation coordinator for the fire department. With 16 years experience in the fire service, both in operations and fire prevention, Jerry's a member of the board of directors for the International Association of Wildland Fire and is also a member of the Boise District BLM Resource Advisory Council, and he's a certified wildland fire investigator. Welcome, Jerry, and thanks for joining us today from Boise.
Hi, Kathy. Thanks for having the Boise Fire Department participate in this online virtual workshop. We're really pleased to be a part of it, and we realize we still have a lot to learn and a long way to go in terms of our efforts in our area, but we really appreciate the opportunity to share with other folks out there. So thank you.
Well, Jerry, you've spent a lot of years talking to residents about the importance of wildfire mitigation around homes. And this year, in late June, your city experienced the 2,500-acre Table Rock fire that was started by fireworks. It destroyed one home, but it threatened hundreds of others. Give us some details and show us some slides about the area where that fire occurred.
So Kathy, thank you for that question. First of all, I'd like to extend a thank you to all of our cooperators and partners in the fire agencies, both federal and local, that helped us put this fire out. Our crews did a terrific job, and the associating crews with BLM and our adjacent jurisdictions did an awesome and wonderful job getting this fire put out and protecting the homeowners. I want to talk about the area real quick. It's what we call our Boise front, or the Ada County front. It's topographically steep. It's comprised of sagebrush and bitterbrush the things that you'd find in the sage steppe ecosystem. We've got native grasses and forbs, as well as a lot of invasive annuals such as cheatgrass and Medusa head rye. So it's extremely steep. The fire that night, it's interesting. It seems like more and more we hear about fires at night that are extremely active, and this was no different. We had an extremely active fire. There's a really cool video out there on Vimeo, which shows the fire progressing from night until morning. It's little snippets of the fire over the night, but it really it burned very, very quickly, and then the fire behavior was substantial.
Boise offers residents a unique opportunity to look at what Firewise landscaping really is in the Idaho Botanical Gardens Firewise demo area. Share a quick description of the garden and tell us how close the fire got to it.
Thanks, Kathy. The Idaho Botanical Gardens is located out by the old state penitentiary. Part of the Idaho Botanical Gardens is the Idaho Firewise Garden. Idaho Firewise has been a wonderful partner for many years on wildfire mitigation projects in our area, and they've been a partner in terms of going to homeowners association meetings and sharing the Firewise message and landscaping practices messaging. So they've set this garden up out of the Botanical Gardens as a demonstration for folks to show them zone concepts in terms of how to plant, starting at their home with zone 1 and moving out to zone 2 and zone 3. And then some of the beautiful plants that you can plant within those zones are displayed out in this demonstration area. It's really, really a neat site, and I would recommend to anybody that is in our area or visiting our area to go out and take a look at it. It will really inform you as to what kind of plants to plant within those zones. The fire that night on the Table Rock fire, it did burn down towards the Botanical Gardens. And aside from, scorching some trees, most of them deciduous trees, it didn't do really a whole lot of damage to the Idaho Firewise Garden.
Well, that picture is great. You can see back in the background where the fire burned and then the gardens in the forefront. There's 6 communities in Boise that participate in the National Firewise program, and the Table Rock fire threatened 2 of those, Warm Springs Mesa and Morningside Heights. Describe the work that those 2 communities had done before the fire.
Kathy, we do have 6 Firewise communities, and I just want to throw kudos out to those communities for taking part in the National Firewise Communities USA program. Warm Springs Mesa is one of our older Firewise communities. They started in 2011, and they're one of our more active Firewise communities. They were directly impacted by the fire. The fire started just to the north of Warm Springs Mesa. And again, talking about the fire behavior that night, it was very, very interesting in terms of the winds. The winds kept shifting. First, the fire would blow towards the east, and then it pushed towards the south, and then it pushed back against itself towards the west, and it just kept shifting around, and the fire behavior was very active. Warm Springs Mesa has been doing a number of different wildfire mitigation projects over the last several years in conjunction with our local partners, Southwest Idaho RC&D, Bureau of Land Management, and the City of Boise, and other partners. But they've been doing things such as sagebrush thinning. They have reseeded an area, basically revegetated an area by thatching the Medusa head out of that area, spraying it with plateau, mazopic, and then reseeding with native grasses and forbs. Some of the things that they've done over the last several years have really made a difference in terms of fire. I'll give you a quick example. In 2012, I have what I call a squirrel fire in Warm Springs Mesa, where we had a squirrel get up into a transformer, get zapped, drop to the ground, and ignite a grass fire. Just a couple months prior to that, goats had grazed through that area and substantially reduced the fuel load in that area, so that when that squirrel started that grass fire, it really didn't do anything. It just kind of crept along. One of the homeowners was able to grab a garden hose and quickly put out the fire. By the time our crews got there, the fire was essentially put out and didn't do hardly any damage. It was less than a half an acre in size. And so the things that they've been doing directly impact how wildfire affects that community. And the Table Rock fire is no different. I think some of the things that they've done help protect the community from the threat of that wildfire. They also had some substantial earthwork going on at the top of Warm Springs Mesa, where a new development or an extension of the Warm Springs Mesa development is taking place. And those earthworks also helped protect that community from that fire when it started pushing kind of southwest.
Well, you had a lot of involvement from animals up there in Boise in the past, huh? The squirrel fire and the goats and all those things.
That's right.
Jerry, you have lots of wildland firefighting experience, and that shaped the messages that you share with residents about wildfire and also about the importance of doing work in their home ignition zones. What do you say to get them motivated to do mitigation?
Well, we want folks to first understand kind of the fire adapted communities message, that they have chose to live in an area that is prone to wildfire, that has a historical wildfire regime, that will always have wildfire occurring in those areas. And it's just a matter of time before the next one. And so we want them to learn to live with fire. By learning to live with fire, they're doing things around their home to protect themselves from the threat of wildfire. We also want them to understand that they have there's a limited capacity for firefighting in our area. We only have 16 engines on the Boise Fire Department. The associated jurisdictions, have a limited number of engines and brush fire vehicles. And we just don't have a substantial firefighting capacity to be at every single house in the event of a wildfire. And so people need to understand that we may very well not be parked in front of their house in case of wildfire. And so we want them to create survivable space. Defensible space is great. It's a great concept, but it assumes that folks will have somebody there to defend their property, and that's just not the case in a lot of circumstances. So we want folks to create survivable space. We want homeowners to understand that they're the first line of defense, that the things that they do on their property matter, and that in terms of protecting themselves, in terms of protecting their neighbors, their properties, the environment, and protecting firefighters, and that's important as well. So I want to throw that out there. We want folks to plan for evacuation and put together a family evacuation plan, if you will. When a wildfire occurs in a neighborhood, it's extremely chaotic. There's a ton of smoke in the air, and if folks don't have a pre-plan as to 2 different ways to get out of that neighborhood, it's going to be very difficult for them to evacuate that neighborhood. And so we want people to have that evacuation plan in place, have 2 ways out, have papers and documents in order so that they can quickly evacuate in a timely fashion. We also want to encourage communities to become FireWise and take part in the FireWise Communities USA program. It's a wonderful partnership, and it's really all about neighbors helping neighbors. Anymore these days, people are so disconnected from their neighbors. They go home, they pull into their driveway, they pull into the garage, shut the garage door, go in, turn the TV on, do whatever, taking their kids to sports. And so communities are very, very disconnected. FireWise Communities USA program is an opportunity for folks to engage with their community members with one goal in mind, and that's to help create a safer environment for the community from the threat of wildfire. And so it's a terrific program in that regard. And then lastly, we want folks to take action and do things on their properties to help protect themselves, their property, and the environment, firefighters from the threat of wildfire.
Thanks, Jerry. I'm sure there's going to be some questions for you later in the hour, but thank you for being a part of this today. Next, we want to move over to Boulder. So we're going to go from Idaho to Colorado and talk with Jim Webster. And Jim is the Wildfire Partners Program Coordinator in Boulder County's Land Use Department. Jim developed their public-private partnership and in collaboration with over 35 participating organizations. He also wrote Boulder County's Community Wildfire Protection Plan. He's worked with communities throughout the U.S. and around the world. And a big welcome to you, Jim, and thanks for joining us today from Boulder.
Thank you.
I want to talk about the Cold Springs fire that happened in Nederland this past July. But before we get into that, give us a quick historical overview of Boulder County's wildfire mitigation efforts.
So our mitigation efforts started in earnest following the 1989 Black Tiger fire. We've implemented a long list of mitigation programs, many that Jerry mentioned and that you around the country are involved in. We've had thousands of homeowners investing millions of dollars in mitigation. So we've been a leader in mitigation efforts. Then in 2010, we lost 168 homes in the 4 Mile Canyon fire. Some homeowners had stories about how their mitigation helped save their homes, and some homeowners had stories saying the mitigation they performed was not effective. What we lacked was independent verification of the actual mitigation status of homes at the time of the fire. We didn't have a current map, home by home, of what mitigation measures had been performed and what mitigation measures had not. So our anecdotal information was difficult for the insurance companies, for the researchers, and everyone else to evaluate. As we know, insurance companies rely on actuaries to analyze data and perform quantitative analysis to make decisions. So they need numbers, not just stories. So we have a lot of lessons from the 4 Mile fire. And we launched Wildfire Partners in 2014 based on our experience from past mitigation efforts. It's a home certification program, working home by home and then with neighborhoods and communities. And we'll talk more about the Wildfire Partners program. But one of the objectives of the program is to keep track of individuals and their mitigation status for the life of the time they're in the home. Not just one time, but include the important maintenance that all of us know about. So I'm going to talk about the Cold Springs fire because it gave us a chance to test the effectiveness of the Wildfire Partners mitigation and some of our past mitigation efforts. So suppression.
No, go ahead, Jim. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
So I want to know, tell us about the mitigation work that was done in that area before the fire and what were the results of that work?
Thanks, got ahead of you there. So large suppression effort, over 500 firefighters, $4.5 million, really important story, but I'm not going to focus on the suppression story. Also, we had fuel treatments in the area with the Forest Service that played a big role, part of the story. But what I'm really going to focus on in my presentation is the homeowner mitigation, to see the results, how the mitigated homes fared during this fire. Here's a picture of the Cold Springs area. We have white private property, and in green, we have Forest Service and county open space. We have 313 homes in this area. So I'm going to walk through 4 programs and the status of the area in terms of what homeowners have participated in. So we've had a chipping program in the county since '93, thousands of homes participating. Just in 2014 and 2015, we had 575 separate properties participating. And in the Cold Springs area, we had the St. Anton's neighborhood off here to the right that had participated, but we didn't have any participation from the Bonanza Estates neighborhood that you'll see right in the center. And we'll come back to that at the end of the presentation. We also have community forestry sort yards, 2 in the county where residents can drop off their material for free. We've had over 33,000 loads deposited at the sort yards. And here we had 136 sort yard users in 2014 and 15 from this Cold Springs area. We also have a building code and land use code that requires mitigation of new homes. They have to build with ignition resistant construction, creating that survivable space as well that Jerry talked about. So we've had over 1,000 homes through this process since 1993. Here are the 99 homes in the Cold Springs area that have been mitigated up to code. We also have the Wildfire Partners program that I mentioned, our comprehensive program for mitigation in this area. In the past, in 2014 and 15, 49 homeowners were participating. So in total, we have 202 homes in this area that have done some sort of mitigation. So the Cold Springs fire started on July 9th, 1:30 on private land, unattended campfire, the origins of that fire. Here's a picture of the area, give yourself oriented. First day expanded over 200 acres. This gives you a sense of what the community looks like. Second day, 200 plus acres as well. Over 2,000 people are evacuated. So we're going to focus on the homes within the burn area, but impacted the community and large segment of the population evacuated and concerned about the status of their homes. So After 4 days, fire totaled 528 acres. You see the footprint here and the origins. Total of 8 homes were lost and numerous outbuildings as a result of this fire. All 13 of the homes that went through the building code and mitigated according to code survived the fire. All 8 of the Wildfire Partners home survived the fire. So a positive result. It's a small sample size, but a lot better than the opposite result. So we had 19 homes that were mitigated that survived the fire. 2 of those homes participated in both programs. 2 of the sort yard users did lose their home, but they didn't do the comprehensive mitigation that we recommend. Again, dropping materials off at a sort yard is a start of the mitigation process, but we all know the importance of mitigating comprehensively and looking at the structure as well. So these homeowners had done some work on vegetation, but had not looked at their home and mitigated the structure as well. So we'll take a little bit of a look at the area. We're going to look at some before and after aerial photos. And as most of you know, that these aerial photos are only going to tell part of the story. We really need to look at the home itself, the attachments, the area right around the home, the surface fuels. So ideally, we'd all take a tour where we could go around and look at these homes, talk to the firefighters, talk to the homeowners. But in this quick analysis, we're just going to look at some of the aerial photos of some of the properties. First property we'll look at here, really close to the origins of the fire, 141 Sherwood. Here's a picture beforehand. See some of the aspen trees there. Here's a picture after the fire. Here's a better picture post-fire. So this homeowner actually went out with firefighters to locate the origin of the fire. He'd been doing fire mitigation for years. When he bought the property, he said he thought about the prospects of this Cold Springs fire, and it did mitigation work, not just on the home in zone 1 and 2 with the help of Wildfire Partners, but he spent years in his zone 3 promoting aspen. You'll see the aspen here. Again, very good species we want to promote in fire. So we did a lot of work throughout his forestry, his forested area to create a well-mitigated home. There's no firefighters here during the fire, but his mitigation helped save his home. 2 of his neighbors did not survive the fire. He says if they had done mitigation like he did, he would have thought they would have survived as well. Here's another home. It was not able, it did not survive the fire, did not perform mitigation, very long driveway and access. We'll look at 33 Sherwood again at ground zero. This homeowner did mitigation with partners, spending a lot of time clearing fuels around the house and hardening his home. Here's a picture of the fire afterwards. Here's a better picture of this home. Firefighters did support this home at the event, but again, his years of mitigation work through his 30 acres and his assistance from Wildfire Partners, a success story of mitigation. 2 of his neighbors' homes were lost. Here's another home in the area. It's not a Wildfire Partners home, did not perform mitigation. It was lost. Still a lot of vegetation surviving around the home. We know the story of embers. Not all homes are lost by crown fires. We lose most homes with embers, 83% in our 4 Mile fire. So this shows the importance of mitigating the home as well as the forest. We'll look at another home here at 2808 Ridge, Wildfire Partners home, mitigation beforehand. Here's the after picture. You can notice a little maybe red tinge here, some slurry dropped here. So a combination of mitigation and suppression was successful for this homeowner. Another home next door at Ridge, before picture and after picture. This home survived. A better picture here. So this home was built according to code with ignition resistant construction, cracked windows on 3 sides of the home. Fire didn't enter because the windows were double paned. They created defensible space around the home, and the homeowner did a great job maintaining that with clearing pine, needles, and duff from away from the trees. Firefighters were not here at the time of the fire, so a great example of good mitigation, saving a home during a fire.
Jim, those photos and those maps really help tell the story. Thanks for sharing those. Having that parcel level mitigation information really proved valuable post-fire. but explain the Wildfire Partners program and how you promote mitigation and how you collect information.
So Wildfire Partners is a comprehensive program. It involves working with homeowners over the life of the time they're in the home. They have to commit to doing maintenance mitigation in order to get in the program. So we've worked with now about 1,000 homeowners involved in the program. It's voluntary, people sign up, and it's a public-private partnership. So in the past, before 4 Mile, we spent a lot of time working with agencies and homeowners. In Wildfire Partners, we have a really strong presence from the private sector, working with insurance companies and working with realtors, people who participate in past webinars. Might have heard from Carol Walker, Steve Quarles. They are partners in this process. The key to the program is an on-site assessment, one-on-one with a wildfire mitigation specialist who has training in this area. Takes 2 to 4 hours. We have an iPad app. Don't use paper forms anymore. So we look at 10 categories, over 50 questions that are evaluated. We take pictures during the assessment. So we have a large team that's involved, keeping track. We have phone advisors that assist people throughout the life of the time they're in the home to answer questions. So the key is to provide value to homeowners. We include this comprehensive assessment, and then homeowners get a customized report with pictures of all the things they need to mitigate that they can keep track of over time, their to-do list. And they have phone advisors to assist with the process. When they finish their to-do list, we'll come back and inspect. If they pass, they receive a certificate and a yard sign and a letter that they can provide their insurance company in order to obtain insurance. The issue here is insurability. It's not discounts, but the certificate helps homeowners obtain insurance. So they get that recognition. We have financial assistance as well. So going back to the Cold Springs fire, this is the Bonanza Estates neighborhood. We recently had a group called Saws and Slaws, which is short for chainsaws and coleslaws. They say it's like an Amish barn raising without the Amish and without the barn. Neighbors come together. We talked about the importance of neighbors helping neighbors. Jerry mentioned that. So these people come together and do the mitigation on the Wildfire Partners homes, homeowners that don't have the resources to hire out contractors or do the work themselves. So these homeowners came together and mitigated these 7 homes on just the end of September. And also, post-fire, we did a community chipping event. So the Bonanza Estates neighborhood that didn't have the chipping program before came together. 23 properties participated in a chipping event. So lots of information from the Cold Springs Fire and Wildfire Partners that I covered quickly. I encourage people who want to learn more about Wildfire Partners to go to our website, wildfirepartners.org. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. We're going to talk with you again in a few minutes when we get to the questions. So now we're going to jump from Boulder up into Washington, where we're going to talk to Patrick Haggerty. And Patrick is a project coordinator with the Cascadia Conservation District in Wenatchee, Washington. And after studying landscape ecology at Western Washington University, he worked as a fish and wildlife biologist before focusing on his career of forestry. And thanks, Patrick, for joining us from your vacation today. I will say, of everybody we've ever invited to participate, you're the first that said they would do it from vacation. So our thanks to you.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Patrick, let's jump back into late August with the Suncrest fire that began in Leavenworth, Washington. I want to hear about the success story there. But before we do, let's start with a quick overview of how that area has been preparing for fires for many, many years. And they've done that in collaboration with both the Conservation District where you work and also the Chumstick Wildfire Stewardship Coalition.
Yeah, so there's a long history based around wildfire preparedness in Chelan County, and that's really a function of the wildfire history in our county. And this map kind of illustrates that. So I think it's a good place to start telling this story. And as you can see, that we've had a lot of fire history in our county. So that from 1900 to 2014, you can see a lot of our landscape has been affected by fire. And that really started to push groups to start taking action, and that kind of started with the Leavenworth Neighborhoods Group, a grassroots organization that said, let's get together and start thinking about how to make our community more resilient. And that morphed into this group called the Chumstick Wildfire Stewardship Coalition, which has really worked with both the Forest Service on the landscape level treatments, but also with individuals in the fire district, creating Firewise communities, and then they've also gotten involved with the Fire Adapted Communities Learning Network, both at the national level and our state Fire Adapted Communities Network. And so what's really happened is the Chumstick Coalition has done all this great work over the last couple of 15 years or decade or so, and the Conservation District has really tried to extrapolate that work throughout the county. So we've had this really great test case in terms of a one watershed that's been really active, and so we've used a lot of the lessons learned there to move those throughout the county and work with other communities. So we're doing a lot of the same things that you've heard about from Boulder and Boise, with roving chipper programs, free home risk assessments from the fire districts, from the conservation districts, DNR and the Chumstick. We have cost share programs for forest health projects through our state DNR and NRCS, free dump days. One of the big things that we've been working on in terms of preparedness is also education and outreach. For example, we took 900 students into the field, up into the woods this fall. All the middle schools in the Wenatchee School District got a chance to go take a hike and do different labs out in the forest to talk about forest ecology and wildfire risk. So those are a few of the things that we've been doing. I think one of the important things too is our addition to the Firewise communities is working at more of the fire adapted community level. And so we've been doing things like business resiliency workshops and working with communities on how to best recover from fires.
Thanks, Patrick. Someday I'm going to have to call you and we can spend an hour on the phone, because I'd really like to hear more about the field trips that you did with the students. But because of all the work and preparations the community's done, how did that impact the fire behavior in the Suncrest fire?
Yeah, so I'm sorry, I'm missing my slides here. So really, there's a couple things to talk about in terms of how the preparedness efforts in the community affected wildfire behavior. And really, the story I wanted to tell is that our wildfire history really makes it clear that we have communities at risk, and that's kind of what this slide is showing. And here's a little bit of on the preparedness efforts that we've done around the county. Fire in particular, there's two big pieces to it. It's the work that's being done on the ground by landowners preparing, and it's the work that is being done on the landscape level by our land managers with the Forest Service and the DNR and BLM. And in terms of what happened in the wildland urban interface, where fire was burning right up to the edges of homes, there's several big players that played a major role in the fire behavior. It was the weather. Late August, we were already moving towards fall, and we had great weather for this event in terms of cool, high winds the day of the event, but followed by low winds and continual cooling trends with rising humidity. There was also resources available, which has been a very different scenario for us than the last couple of fire seasons. And there was the landowner preparation. And I think it's very clear from the responders' point of view that the reason that they were able to get behind homes and work around the structures was because of the landowner work that had been done. And what we've really found out is that talking with landowners following up on the treatments or the fire is that there was a real cultural understanding of fire's role on the landscape in this area. And this is an area that most of the homes are owned by. It's unique in Chelan County where we have a lot of secondary home ownership, but this area was mostly owned by primary residents who'd been in the valley a long time and seen fire many times. So there was that cultural understanding that played a large role. On the landscape level, the U.S. Forest Service did do a treatment in the upper watershed, which allowed for very successful backburning and strengthening of natural and enhanced fire lines. And that really told the story of those treatments working. And I think it's worth, here's a map showing the 290-acre fire. And you can see Leavenworth is just to the left side of the map there. But I think it's worth really quickly contrasting this with some of the fires we've had in 2014 and 2015, particularly the Sleepy Hollow fire. It was another relatively small fire just outside of Wenatchee, Washington, but with weather of 112 degrees, extremely high winds and erratic fire behavior, and different fuels. Very different landscape here, just 20 miles east of more of a shrub steppe environment, flashy fuels, and much more dense neighborhoods and more established neighborhoods as well. So we were dealing with neighborhoods that had very mature landscaping that hadn't had appropriate maintenance over a lot of years in some cases. And so this was a case where we did lose structures, and it was because of very different availability of resources, weather, and in some cases, preparedness.
So right after the fire, I saw some testimonials on Facebook from residents that were touting the benefits of mitigation and literally proclaiming that it was well worth the effort. You told me you'd heard some of those same great stories. Can you share some of those with us?
Yeah, definitely. You know, after the last several fire seasons, we set state records in 2014 and again in 2015. The Conservation District really realized that we needed to put some effort into working with landowners on the post-fire recovery side of things. And in part of this effort, I found that one of the most impactful pieces of this was site visits with individual landowners to discuss their natural resource concerns, or often just listen. Most of the landowners who were affected by the Suncrest fire reached out to me for a site visit, and it was incredible to hear some of the Facebook testimonials firsthand. One B&B owner in particular talked to me about a FireWise home risk assessment he had done by Chelan Fire District 3 over 10 years ago, right when he built his home. And ever since then, protecting his business and also the landscape that makes Leavenworth such a popular area as a tourist destination for recreation, hiking, biking, rafting, are all the things that draw people to his B&B. So he really knew that the landscape was an important part of his business, let alone its structure. And so, you know, he spent countless weekends, he said, out there just doing fuels reduction, thinning the forest behind his home. And when the Suncrest fire came, he was protecting his home, watering around the perimeter, and DNR showed up for just a few minutes as the fire was moving quickly. And when they told him it was time for him to leave, he was down the driveway and retreated to an orchard, and he said DNR was just right behind him just a few minutes later. And as he tried to see through that smoke for the next half hour and couldn't see his home at all, he didn't know what to think. He thought maybe he lost everything. And as the smoke cleared, he he saw that his house did survive, and that the fire burned 360 degrees around the home with no damage to the structure.
Those stories, I think when we talked earlier last week, I told you those just give you goosebumps, because those are the success stories that we need to make sure that residents here, as stakeholders and agencies, we get to hear those more often, but we've got to get in better practice of making sure that we share those, because that's what motivates other residents to really do those kinds of work. So those stories I just love. I could listen to them all day. We're at about 6 weeks since the Suncrest fire. Do you think the saves from that fire have changed or impacted the community's view of mitigation?
I do. I think that this was really just positive reinforcement for the wildfire preparedness work that's become a real priority for folks around the county. I think it's important to note that we had a lot of advantages during this fire in terms of weather and resources available, but we saw some real positive things come out of it on a lot of different levels. I think the first level we saw right at the incident community meeting, when the responders all got up to talk to the community, and we got to hear about how they were really able to apply lessons learned from the last several years, which resulted in the local fire chief recognizing this as the smoothest wildfire event he's worked on throughout his 30-year career. Interagency collaboration, resource coordination, and incident command transitions all flowed smoothly as a result of hard work done by local, state, and federal firefighting agencies, and in many cases because of changes that were made based off the last couple of fire seasons. So that was great reinforcement for our responders. I think that this has also been a story that our FireWise community leaders have been able to take back to their neighborhoods. And we've watched it motivate neighbors to get to work together to become recognized FireWise communities, to develop projects and implement projects to make their neighborhoods and homes more resilient to wildfire. I think we've got 11 new FireWise communities that were recognized this summer in the county, and many more on their way. And we're really starting to see work getting done in those communities and those neighborhoods coming together. I think while the outcomes of the Suncrest fire encouraged work near homes, it's also provided support for the much needed landscape restoration that's needed as well, and it's another important part of the story. I think by raising awareness and providing more social license to use all the restoration tools available, including mechanical thinning, prescribed fire, and in some cases management of natural wildfire when appropriate. But when we see responders be able to do their jobs safely and more effectively based off the work of both individuals and land managers, it provides more community buy-in for things like the prescribed fire efforts that we're starting to see occur more often. And so this picture in the top here is actually from a prescribed fire just about 3 miles north of the Suncrest fire just last week, and so having the community say, oh yeah, this is what we need to be doing, restoring our landscapes in accordance with our Wenatchee National Forest restoration strategy. I think that goes a long way as well.
Patrick, so many good things going on in Washington. Stay with us, and we're going to head into the live Ask an Expert Q&A now. So again, I want to throw out there, if you have a question for Jim, for Jerry, for Patrick, you can ask that question using the question mark icon on that upper right-hand side of your screen. Before we start taking questions, I just want to go to the next slide and keep that one up, that talks about our next workshop that's coming up on November 17th. And that one is the 2016 Wildland Fire Urban Legends Part 2. last year in our series of workshops. We did this session, and it was very popular, and it was one of those that we got a lot of calls and requests to bring it back again this year. So it's a new one this year with a lot more new ways to talk to Pat Derland, who's going to be our featured guest speaker, and Lucian Deaton, who will be the host. So I'm going to jump over to questions. There's a couple of questions on there right now. And this one, I think I'm going to refer this one to Jerry to start with. So Jerry, the question is, should chips, after you've done chipping, should chips be spread on the ground? And if they are, what's the fire behavior when fire burns in the chips that you've left on the ground?
Hi, Kathy. Hey, with our woody biomass removal in terms of chipping programs and such, we haul that off to a recycler, and we do not chip and leave the debris on the ground. So we haven't experienced that. I don't think that we would necessarily do that, maybe along the Boise River corridor in one of our riparian areas, if it was proper to do so. But yeah, we don't chip and leave that on the ground.
So I'm going to throw that back out now to Jim and Patrick. In your chipping projects and the ones that you know about, are chips left on the ground? And if so, what's been the fire behavior in that area? So let's go ahead and start with Jim, and then Patrick, we'll have you jump in too.
Yeah, because we've noticed in past fire where there are heavy layers of chips, there is concern. So if anyone in the Wildfire Partners Program, if there's a pile of chips anywhere on the property, they fail their inspection. So we don't allow piles of chips. We don't allow any chips in Zone 1. A lot of homeowners will choose to have chips hauled off of site. Some homeowners, because of cost, will broadcast chips if they have land in Zone 2, Zone 3, but there's specific specifications on what to do with chips and the depth, 2 to 4 inches, and not in areas near vegetation. So more and more homes and homeowners and chipping programs are having chips hauled off site, and we're very conscious of where chips are placed because they can increase fire risk. We don't want to just rearrange fuels. So with our certification process, anybody that has chips files or chips in Zone 1 will fail until they remove those chips.
And Patrick, what are you seeing up in Washington?
Yeah, I'd echo what Jim said in that we have options to haul away the chips or broadcast, but often the land, there's more expense in hauling away. We haven't seen fire behavior coming through a heavily chipped area, but we do broadcast with specific specifications that they can't be in Zone 1, and that they really need to be, the placement of those chips needs to be thought through thoroughly, and really the density of those chips is the critical thing. In these dry forests, decomposition is a pretty slow process in most of our areas, so we don't see these chips turning into wet organic material very quickly. So keeping that layer thin and as far away from the home as possible, if you do need to broadcast, is all we've come up with.
Hey, Patrick, share for some of our lay people that are participating today what you mean when you say broadcast.
Yeah, so that's having the chipping crew come in, and as they're chipping and moving that chipper from pile to pile, they're moving the spout on that chipper and rotating it in 180 degrees and just layering a thin layer in probably a 30-foot span of those chips across the landscape.
Great, thanks for that. So the next question is for you, Jim, and the question is, what kinds of data are Wildfire Partners collecting, and who do you share that data with?
So in our assessment, we have an iPad app with over 50 questions, and we're taking pictures and recording information. And so 10 categories, we start with the roof. We look at all aspects of the roof, turn then to the walls. We look at all the attachments. We look at different zones. So it's a really extensive questionnaire. that we gather information, and then each specific home we're taking notes and writing down information, and then that information gets uploaded into our Salesforce and other mapping databases. And then our entire communication with homeowners over time in our Salesforce customer relationship management software, we enter in all the communications and follow-up inspections, and that's in our databases. So we don't share that, those databases. Of course, we share the customized report with the homeowner. Eventually, when homeowners receive certificates, they can choose to provide that to the insurance companies, but the data is in our databases, and we'll share that with the individual homeowner, and then we keep track of that over time. So it's an exhaustive, huge data set, and we're looking at every potential vulnerability of a home, taking dozens and dozens of pictures before and then after with the inspection, and then we'll visit homes in the future and keep track of that information to keep it current. So we used to keep 2,500 assessments. A lot of people do assessments in the 90s and 2000s where we worked on paper forms, and that was really hard to track. So now we have things that are in GIS systems and in using modern technology that the private sector uses to keep track of all this information in an organized way. So we can go back and look at how much people are spending on all the different mitigation measures by measure. We can analyze the data in terms of all different kinds of reports that are very interesting. Of course, one reason IBHS and Firewise and everybody's involved in this program is the collection of data, and we'll produce reports annually summarizing the whole program, but the individual homeowner data is not shared with anybody but the homeowner.
Okay, so we're going to do another question, and I'm going to throw it out to the three of you. Whoever wants to go with this one, I think you can all answer this one, so whoever wants to take the next one. Will the mulching effect of broadcast chips prevent fine, flashy fuels like cheatgrass from becoming established? Patrick, you want
Well,
to
I can take the first stab at that one. We use mulch on all of our riparian plantings and so much of our restoration work as a really effective tool for weed suppression. In the case of cheatgrass, we haven't had as much luck, and particularly because I think to have those broadcasted chips act as a effective weed suppression for cheatgrass, it would need to be thick, in the 4 to 6 inches realm. And really, we're encouraging people not to pile wood chips that thick in any of the zones around their homes. It's really only appropriate in a really wet area, like a riparian area. So we haven't seen it work well for suppressing cheatgrass.
Let's let that be a segue into a question that I'm going to ask you, just because we hear this one so often, so it's probably opportune to go ahead and ask it. When people ask what is the best depth of mulch to leave on the ground, what are you telling residents, Patrick?
Well, I say, in the 1 to 3 inches realm. Kind of that 3 inches is the maximum that we're looking for. But the other thing I really encourage people to do, like any fuels reduction project, is it's really about breaking up the fuels and creating a discontinuous fuel line, especially towards the structure. So whenever there's an opportunity to maybe have patches of chips that are still thinly spread, and then well manicured vegetation in between those patches, that can be a good strategy as well.
Thanks for that one. Jim, this one's for you, and it's from a fire department, Colorado, and they say, I've been told that there's interest in duplicating the Wildfire Partners program in other areas of Colorado. Are you aware of any discussions regarding Jefferson County specifically? And if not, can you provide some suggestions for having these discussions and moving forward with the concept?
So yeah, we've been talking with Jefferson County. Wildfire Partners, an offshoot is now in Eagle County. So we've been at the legislature talking about expanding wildfire partners around Colorado, and I've been around the country with other states interested in expanding wildfire partners. So I think there's a lot of interest because we've been doing mitigation, but to do the thorough follow through and the comprehensive mitigation, there's a lot of interest from insurance companies. One reason we've really partnered a lot with insurance companies is they have the same interest in getting the home saved, and they're spending a lot of time and effort looking at this problem. From their perspective, we need to partner with insurance companies and others to work together, not to have duplicate efforts and not to have redundancies or uncertainties for homeowners. If homeowners don't know that their insurance company is going to accept the word of their fire department or their extension agents and vice versa, it's really hard to invest large amounts of time and money. So there's a lot of interest around the country in Colorado in replicating the Wildfire Partners process and the certification process. And insurance companies are already doing this certification. Some people are worried about doing an inspection and certification, but insurance companies have their informal certification process where they're setting a standard and inspecting and denying or approving insurance based on that process. So it's taking place, but some of those programs are lacking. So when they partner with public agencies like counties and states and feds, they can do a much better job of the certification process, have a more rigorous assessment, local knowledge, and that's followed through over time and have funding. So there's a lot of interest in this model.
Thanks, Jim. So this one I'm going to throw out there to Jerry and Patrick, just because I know that you have a lot of investment property owners there. And the question is, do you find that owners of investment properties and their property managers show the same interest in mitigation as owner occupants? And do they require a different type of message to get them motivated to be proactive with mitigation? So Jerry, we talked specifically about messaging with you. So let's kind of dissect that question. And do you feel like those investment properties and property managers require a different type of message to get them motivated?
Kathy, I do. I think, if the owner's on site and they're living there within that environment and, they're seeing wildfires occur year after year, they're more cognizant as to, or more present in knowing that they need to do something about their risk. If the owner is detached, they live elsewhere, and they're just renting out the property, renters have a difficult time, trying to come to grips with what they can and can't do on those properties, because they don't own the property. And so that becomes a little bit difficult. I'm really curious to hear what others are doing in that area. And then aside from that, when you're talking about investment properties and developments, so for new developments, where we've got builder developers investing in property, we're finding more so that they're interested in mitigating the risk up front before the properties are even developed and creating, you mentioned Pat Derland coming up on your next workshop. He's done some great work here in the Boise area with developers in terms of providing, wildfire mitigation plans and or a model wildfire mitigation plan, if you will. So we've been working with folks on that end to put things up front for new communities so that they're protected over time, so that we don't run into that issue in the future where there's a disattached homeowner that's really not doing anything.
So Patrick or Jim, anything you want to add to what Jerry said? Yeah,
I would just really add on the education component. In our experience, and Washington's unique in that we have extremely different geography on the west side of the Cascades versus the east side of the Cascades, and so wildfire is not really perceived as a west side issue oftentimes where our population base is. But then we have areas like Lake Wenatchee, where there's about 60 to 70% secondary ownership from the Seattle area. And so what we've found is we actually have a lot of success engaging these folks in FireWise communities and doing defensible space and fuels reduction work on their properties. but they just need to find out about it first, and that's the really challenging piece. And the education of just letting them know about these issues is the tough part. One thing that we've just started in this county is a production called The Era of Mega Fires that features a local fire ecologist that kind of TED Talk style with videos that go along with it, presentation that is actually traveling around the West. And we're really hoping that can be a really tangible thing for some of these secondary ownerships to really get a full history of wildfire and the issues that we have now, and be the type of thing that could be shown in Seattle and generate a lot of interest for some of these secondary owners.
Jim, anything you want to add?
Nope, I think they've done a great job.
Well, we reached our full hour, and we did have a few questions that we didn't get to. So our apologies to the participants that asked those questions, and our thanks again to Jerry McAdams and to Jim Webster and to Patrick Haggerty. Your input and your stories, I'm sure that that's generated some new interest and inspiration and motivation. And we thank you for your successes, and we thank each of you for participating today.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Kathy.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. So